So I wasn't planning on making this video right away because yes, it is spoiling one of the bootleg sets that I bought, but I decided to go ahead and make it anyway because I did not plan on getting this set, like, at all. Well, let's just say, if you watched the video I put out yesterday, I talked about the brand Glopo, Dream Builders, Final Fighters. You might know them as something else. Suffice to say, they are one of the most well-known Bionicle knockoff sets, and probably because they're not Bionicle, at least not in the same way. That's a story for a different day, but the set that I bought actually inspired me quite a bit. I'll talk about it, and I'll show it here in just a moment. It's not in hand yet. It's going to take a couple of months, a few months, till it gets here, but still very excited for it. That said, if you guys have been following along with the Bara Magna expansion project, then you know that part of the inspiration that I'm taking for this project is a sort of overarching steampunk vibe. Beneath that as well, we also have characters that are broken up into these sort of allegiance or factions, whatever you want to call them, and essentially some of these characters are dragon / dinosaur inspired in much the same way as like how the Baraki are inspired by sea life, or how the Makuta from 2008 are inspired by mythological demons or insects, etc., right? In this case here, we have some characters dinosaurs, some characters pirates, some characters what I call high craft, and that is going to be its own video because I don't specifically know yet how I want to describe that. That said, though, let's go ahead and take a look at the bootleg that I got, because this is something I kind of want to redesign in Bionicle form as a nod to this set, which is strange. Let's go ahead and get into it. And of course, if you like this content, make sure to like and subscribe. It really does help out. First of all, this character's name is Servaius, or Centrosphere, which is a dumber name. But Servaius is interesting because that is a very Glatorian sounding name. And yeah, that makes sense. The Glatorian names often took their, let's say, root, if you will, from, Latin, Roman languages. And so Servaius is very similar in that way. But also here, you have a character that is very clearly inspired by both like an Onua-like character, but also Kopaka as well, with that mask, specifically that rounded shape, and of course that scope eye. But underlying all of that, this more technical, robotic feel to it, which I think this accomplishes really well, actually. It has that steampunk-like vibe in part because of those dark orange colored pieces. Don't know if that's going to match anything from Lego, and it's not going to matter a whole lot anyway, since those pieces don't fit Lego, at least not the ball joints. That said, though, it's still a really interesting set. As it stands, I've seen a lot of the pieces from the set, and this is one of the more inconsistent sets in general, because some marketing material actually shows it with a chest piece. However, later versions of it, from what I read, did not include that chest piece at all. And in fact, older versions included one of two different colors, either brown or silver. I have not seen a physical brown one, at least not in pictures. I have seen silver in some pictures, and of course, many not having that chest cover, which is unfortunate. The one I bought does not have it either. That said, though, still some really interesting pieces. And when I look at a set like this, I think to myself, okay, there are a lot of pieces here that exist in Bionicle, or at least if they don't exist, could be very easily made out of similar pieces. I look, for example, at the Gorast claw pieces, the three-fingered claws, for example, for these claws here, which are very clearly inspired by both Onua and likely Onua himself, but have a sort of similar design shape, at least, as those Gorast claws, with that sort of curve about at the knuckle line. Now, obviously, they're very different, having these sort of like drill fingers that also really remind me of some like 1920s, Art Deco style, retro future sort of thing. It's really strange, but it is kind of interesting. That said, of course, you can see that the armor on the actual arms and on the legs here as well, in silver nonetheless, is kind of similar in its shape to the Skrull armor, or Vorok's armor, whatever you call it. Obviously, it's not the same, having two fingers on it instead of three, having large holes on each side, but it is similar at the very least. And so it makes me think, well, what if I created a character as a nod to this. The mask is interesting, and though I don't personally like to create asymmetric pieces, at least not for no reason, and there are different types of asymmetry, and I'll get into that in a moment, but I thought to myself, in part, one of the things that I had considered for this theme was actually having parts that could be added on, that could be tacked onto masks, right? And you could get them in like a sprue or something so that it's just one mold, but it contains multiple pieces that you get to choose from. You could have an eye patch for your pirate characters, which, yeah, maybe that's a little weird for a Bionicle world, but it's not a bad idea, you know, or you could have something a little more robotic themed, but adjacent to those pirates. And I think it's a really interesting concept at the very least. However, something else that I think LEGO should have taken far more advantage of with the Glatorian set specifically is the fact that helmets can be reversible by the nature of them attaching to the top of the head rather than the front of the face. It gives you the ability to just take it off, flip it around, and put it back on. And so that means I could design a helmet that's asymmetric on one side, very similar to Jetbug, or Nitro Blast, I think, is another Hero Factory set like that, where it's got one head on one side and the other head has a scoped eye. Now, that head is way too large. It's an enormous mask head thing. I don't personally care for the design of it because of that, but still, admittedly, the idea is fun and worth looking into more. With that said, though, there are plenty of other pieces that I want to design for a theme like this, and one of the pieces that I thought of already were the pirate ship wheel, right? Because I wanted this wheel to be a piece that you could use on the actual flagship, the large vehicle that's going to be made for this theme, but also something that could be consistent of multiple pieces rather than just one. I'm going to scroll back out of this for a moment. The main reason I wanted to design a piece that could be basically broken down is for a handful of reasons. First of all, one of the ideas that I had for it, which was actually inspired by the buildable kit that I bought from the number 57 brand. I'm not a kit builder, so I apologize if I'm using the wrong terminology here. But one of the sets that you could buy from that line, from that brand, actually has a parasol weapon, something we obviously did not see in Bionicle, although many Machas have used similar weapons. And the concept here that I thought about, that I took inspiration from this for, is allowing this ship wheel to also act as the parasol. It could act as a shield on other characters as well, but to allow it to be broken down, essentially sliced into a pie. So rather than it being a full circular piece, you could break it in half and have a semicircle, or in this case specifically, I actually wanted to break it into 3 pieces. That's obviously harder to work with because LEGO doesn't tend to have as many pieces that support working in, let's say, in thirds, right? Typically, when you build with LEGO, you're going in essentially 90-degree directions. I'm not going to get into any of that here because I don't have the right words to describe it, but suffice to say, one of the reasons I liked this concept specifically for these weapons is because the parasol weapon, as an example, could be broken down and you could use 2 of those 3, pie slices as fans, right? As fan-like weapons in fists. You could think of them as all sorts of different types of weapons. You could use them as armor pieces, as wing pieces by stacking multiple of them together, which is why I'd have to get creative with the connection points on it, but that's also something I'll have to do a bit later because I plan on actually designing this piece soon, mostly because I want to use it as a learning experience in Blender to really get more comfortable with that program. That said, though, it is also taking inspiration, going back to this for a minute. Both, you can see that this has these gears on this wheel, which made me think, oh, I can use these parasol pieces. Granted, they'd be quite a bit larger than these gear wheels here. But something that does contain these pieces is a mock that was created by a member of my Discord, which is Nate the Time Dragon. And it is this character right here. I've also showcased this on the channel as well once before. This is a character named Zaburu. I apologize if I pronounce that incorrectly, but you can see specifically the gear pieces on the wheel, or on the shoulder, and that's more consistent with what I wanted to design. Except in this case here, it's a semicircle, and in my case, it would be a third of a circle, if that makes sense, right? Now, there are some upsides and downsides to making it 1/3 of a circle. It's obviously much harder to work with for various reasons, and maybe I'll talk about that here in the future. I think the ideal would actually be making it 1/6 of a circle. I'm getting ahead of myself, I know, but the main reason is because a pie that's broken up into 6 pieces can be split in half and can be split in thirds. So it kind of works in both directions. It still would have some limitations, and this is not the video to describe that. The whole point of this video is just to talk about that piece specifically and how I could utilize it on a character like this. In fact, probably this character. I think it'd be a lot of fun to take this character from Glopo, whatever, build it out of Bionicle pieces, redesign some parts for my theme going forward, of course, my wave, take the mask, try to recreate it in a sort of Bionicle compatible piece, and maybe even do something similar with the claws. We do have a decent number of claw molds from Bionicle, so I don't think it's strictly necessary to use these claws particularly, but at the same time, these claws have a very specific aesthetic to them that no Bionicle piece really has. So you could definitely go both ways. It really just depends on how many mold slots are available for this project. Suffice to say, it's all nitty-gritty details. It's all stuff that I don't imagine would make a good video here, but maybe I'll make a video for Patreon or something like that, talking more in depth about this. And with a video like that, I'd like to get more into the lore of this Bionicle theme as it continues to build, because I think that there's a lot to, trying to think of how I want to phrase this, to a brand new world. This is after the Reformation, sure, but it's still Bara Magna at the end of the day. But now, building upon the fact that you have all these new residents with the Toa and the Matoran all kind of existing on one planet now. You have all these new resources you didn't have before because the Reformation brings the Force, brings the water and everything kind of back, if you will. That'll cause some problems later, but I'll get into that. But also the fact that this is also a world that has essentially lived for eons on barren wastes, essentially, and because of that have built their culture around this arena gimmick, this fighting gimmick. And so now with these new resources, I imagine that is going to strain the relationships or build the relationships of a lot of these tribes, right? And so now suddenly you have these 9 tribes that are all kind of clamoring for these resources because some of them are just not going to be super friendly, at least not to start. So it's a really interesting concept, and I think it has a lot of potential. So yeah, I think even if you rush Bionicle's ending in 2010 and bring everything all together at once, there's still a lot of story to be told. So maybe I'm somebody to tell it. Anyway, with all that being said though, guys, if you did enjoy this video, if you want to tell me your thoughts on these bootlegs, specifically these knockoffs, if you have experience with them, let me know in the comments below. And of course, you can join the conversation in the comments, Discord, Instagram, and Patreon if you want to support the channel and get some perks. Maybe that video will come out sometime there as well. And on top of that, make sure you are liking and subscribing because it does not only help out the channel, it's the best possible way you can help, but it also tells YouTube you want to see more content just like this. So I'll see y'all in the next one. Take care.